Bonsoir à tous, chers délégués.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. If we could resume our session. Please take your seats, please. We will begin in 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break. When we left off before lunch, I had closed the list of speakers, with many still on the list. We will now pick up where we left off. I remind you that the list of speakers is closed. Let me remind the name. On my list, I have Indonesia, Tanzania, Kenya, Colombia, United Arab Emirates, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Maldives, Guatemala, Antigua and Barbuda, Burundi, China, Nigeria, Malawi, Nepal, Costa Rica, Uganda, Somalia, Jordan, Syria, Malaysia, Cameroon. Okay, let's start with Indonesia. Indonesia, you have the floor, followed by Tanzania and then Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia appreciates the work of the ad hoc scientific and technical advisory group in preparing the first global report of collective progress under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Indonesia is honored to be among the first 25 parties to submit its 7 national report with the support of UNDP and GIZ Germany, demonstrating our commitment to timely implementation of the framework. While the report provides a valuable global snapshot, its findings should be interpreted in light of parties' different national circumstances, priorities, capacities, and stages of implementation. It should not serve as a basis for ranking parties or creating obligations beyond those agreed under the Convention and the framework. Effective implementation requires not only robust monitoring system, but also adequate means of implementation, including predictable financial resources, capacity building, technology access and transfer, technical and scientific cooperation, and relevant knowledge sharing. In this regard, Indonesia supports strengthening regional technical and scientific cooperation support centers to assist parties in planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. Indonesia supports strengthening national biodiversity monitoring system, provided this remain country-driven, nationally determined, and supported by adequate assistance for developing countries. At this stage, priority should be given to implementation the existing KMGBF headline indicators and building national monitoring capacity rather than developing additional indicators that could increase reporting burdens. Indonesia also underscores the importance of integrating scientific knowledge with the traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous people and local communities, consistent with national legislation and applicable international obligations. Finally, Future work on the monitoring framework should improve usability, interoperability, and flexibility while minimizing additional reporting burdens to support effective national implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Avant donc de donner la parole à la Tanzanie,
Before giving the floor to Tanzania, allow me to recall a few matters. If you'll remember, we have all set up the process for early submission. This early submission aims to save time. We are realizing that if we don't keep to this procedure, then it will be difficult to save time. I would therefore urge states parties, I would urge them, in order to save time, to really go to what they think they could add to the early submission. If not, I think there's no need to really repeat everything that's already been submitted. So go to the elements which you believe you haven't been able to cover in your initial statements. That's an important point to keep in mind. That will enable us to save time because that was the original goal. That was the goal of this process. Secondly, I would recall that we are currently addressing the two sub-items of item 3. So we should keep that in mind, 3A and 3B. That's just a reminder. I hope that we can save time if we are more focused in terms of what's been missing from what's already been submitted when we make our statements. Thank you.
Tanzania, followed by Kenya, and then Colombia. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania aligns itself with the statement delivered by the African Group and wishes to make the following remarks in its national capacity. We thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this document. Tanzania supports a practical and science-based monitoring framework that facilitates effective implementation of the coming Montreal GBF. Mr. Chair, as the monitoring framework continues to evolve, it is important to ensure that any additional indicators do not increase the reporting burden on parties, particularly developing countries. New indicators should be introduced only when they provide clear added value and are supported by well-developed methodologies. Tanzania calls for an inclusive, transparent, and technology-driven monitoring system that meaningfully engages young people in biodiversity data generation, analysis, innovation, and national reporting. Mr. Chair, we further emphasize the need to strengthen financial support, capacity building, technological transfer, and technical cooperation to enable developing countries to effectively implement the monitoring framework. Finally, should an expert group be established to further update the monitoring framework, Tanzania encourages equitable regional representation, including adequate participation of African experts to ensure that Africa's experience and priorities are fully reflected. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. Now I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Colombia, and then United Arab Emirates. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya aligns with the statement by the African Group and welcomes the Global Progress Report. However, we all note that the world remains off track to meet the 2030 targets due to technical, financial, and institutional constraints. Kenya firmly believes that the planning, monitoring, reporting, and review mechanisms must evolve beyond a reporting exercise into an implementation support framework, one that enables adaptive management, evidence-based decision-making, and continuous improvement in biodiversity conservation. On data systems, cooperation, and methodological stability, Kenya calls for better interoperability between national biodiversity information systems, national statistical systems, and the Convention's clearinghouse mechanism to facilitate data exchange and knowledge management. We support strengthened collaboration among partners and promote the South-to-South triangular and regional technical cooperation, including exchange of scientific expertise, monitoring tools, and good implementation practices. On monitoring methodologies, we stress the need for stable methodologies across reporting cycles to preserve consistency and comparability of national data sets while allowing carefully considered improvements where scientifically justified. We support the new technical expert group and recommend expanding its scope to include digital innovation, Earth observation technologies, artificial intelligence, and practical implementation lessons from parties. On knowledge systems and the second review, Kenya strongly supports integrating traditional knowledge, innovations, practices, and community-based monitoring into the framework. This work must promote co-production of knowledge between scientific institutions and indigenous peoples and local communities, consistent with national legislation, indigenous data governance principles, and free, prior, and informed consent. For the second global review, we recommend incorporating scientifically validated Earth observation, geospatial technologies, citizen science, and other innovative observation systems to strengthen biodiversity assessment. On the reporting tools, Kenya welcomes improvement to the online platform to reduce duplication and enable efficient reuse of nationally submitted information. We support interactive dashboards hosted by clearinghouse mechanisms to visualize progress against national targets and enable parties to monitor trends over time. On the agenda item 3B, Chair, turning to the framework, Kenya specifically advocates for practical, inclusive, and sustainable approaches. For developing nations, we must reduce the technical constraints and the excessive reporting burdens, ensuring that metrics directly inform domestic policy, spatial planning, and natural resource management. We support tailoring the framework to national capacities and recognize the voluntary nature to give parties flexibility. Kenya supports the 30 by 30 global conservation targets and advocates for metrics that track community conserved areas and other effective area-based conservation measures. Building on our existing 26% protected and conserved coverage, we propose inclusive, right-based indicators that capture contributions of indigenous people, local communities, youth, and persons with disabilities, alongside specific metrics for areas under traditional stewardship. Kenya proposes indicators measuring tangible progress on fair and equitable benefit sharing arising from utilization of genetic resources and strongly supports operationalizing of headline indicator 22.1. In conclusion,
thank you, Kenya. Now I give the floor to Colombia, followed by United Arab Emirates, then Bosnia. Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This is an essential tool for the implementation of the global framework because for the first time, we have a collective review which enables us to identify progress, gaps, and priorities. Therefore, this exercise needs to be seen not just as an assessment of but it's also a guide for implementation. We have a collective vision and the rhythm of implementation which are insufficient. It's essential that we maintain political will and the state of urgency. Now it's time to speed up. Colombia would like to recognize the different national trajectories of implementation and the recent efforts of many countries in this regard. Implementation cannot be assessed only through outcome indicators. We need to recognize progress in governance, interinstitutional coordination, financial monitoring, and participatory regulations. We need more, when sometimes outcomes take more time to manifest. gaps identified also need to be analyzed in a differentiated manner. We have to understand that these respond to limitations in terms of financing, institutional gaps, lack of political will, or other areas. So international support therefore needs to be guided towards specific obstacles faced by developing countries, and particularly mega diverse countries. Financing needs to be, or continues to be, the main barrier to implementation, and financing for nature at the global level continues to be reduced. This results in ever-increasing issues in terms of national spending. We need incentives which drive public financing in order to liberate the necessary fiscal spaces in order to meet commitments. In the implementation process for NBSAP's chair, the effective participation of indigenous peoples and Afro-descendant peoples has been essential, as well as that of women, youth, and subnational authorities. We have an integral architecture based on an approach of all government and all society, differentiated routes of implementation, and permanent mechanisms of participation. For example, we make available to convention. We believe that any review needs to focus on strengthening implementation, improving the availability of resources, and helping parties implement, and not reopen indicators which will be agreed upon, or add more indicators, or add extra reporting burdens. We would like to respectfully request the Secretariat to initiate steps for the implementation of paragraph 4 of 1616, compiling and making available information reported by parties on contributions of Afro-descendants to the implementation of the Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colombia. Now I give the floor to United Arab Emirates, followed by Bosnia Herzegovina, then Maldives.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يرحب
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United Arab Emirates would like to welcome the global report and the Secretariat's note on the monitoring framework. We also appreciate their voluntary nature based on our circumstances. We would like to put forward the following remarks. First, with regard to the monitoring framework, we support keeping changes to a minimum at this stage of postponing an update of the framework until the 18th meeting of the Conference of the Parties in conjunction with the 8th National Reporting Template. We emphasize that any additional composite or complementary indicators, including the 12 proposed indicators, should remain optional and subject to national circumstances consistent with decisions 15.5 and 1630 first, and should not increase the reporting burden on parties. Second, we note that the number of key indicators still have a low level of methodological readiness, particularly indicators 1.1 and 9.1, which are not currently being implemented by any entity. We call for the continued development of their methodologies supported by adequate resources. Third, in light of limited resources and the approaching year 2030, we encourage streamlining intersessional work. If an expert group is established to update the monitoring framework or continue its implementation, its mandate, outputs, and duration should be clearly defined and should avoid duplication, ensuring that resources are directed first and foremost toward implementation, support, and capacity building. Fourth, we appreciate the safeguard that the review of the national targets should not lead to diverting resources. And we support retaining this flexible wording. The United Arab Emirates would like to insist that in the remaining years until 2030, the focus should remain on the effective implementation of the framework and on supporting parties' capacities. Thank you.
Merci aux Émirats.
I thank the UAE. Already, you have saved us some time. I would also encourage others to follow the example set by the United Arab Emirates. It's true that you have 4 minutes of time, but you can always make a statement in 1 minute. Why not? Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Bosnia, then followed by Maldives, then Guatemala.
Thank you, Chair. Statement by Bosnia and Herzegovina relates to sub-item 3A. Bosnia and Herzegovina congratulates the Secretariat and hashtag for excellent work in preparing the draft global report. It provides a strong basis for the global review of collective progress under Kunming-Montreal framework. We would like to make 3 observations. First, we believe that global report should provide a more balanced interpretation of collective progress. We fully recognize that biodiversity continues to decline and that the world is not yet on track to achieve the goals of the framework. However, progress should be assessed not only in relation to the Kunming-Montreal vision and mission, but also in the context of strategic planning within this convention over the past 30 years. It should recognize the important progress achieved during the past 3 decades in biodiversity policy, legislation, institutions, scientific and traditional knowledge, monitoring systems, and international cooperation through the work of the parties to this convention. These achievements are important enabling conditions for accelerating today's implementation. The global report should therefore distinguish more clearly between progress in biodiversity outcomes and progress in policy and enabling conditions. Second, regarding the collective ambition reflected in national targets, we agree that the current level of ambition remains below the global ambition of the framework. At the same time, this was the first cycle under the completely new planning, monitoring, and reporting system. Parties had to revise their NBSAPs, develop national targets, and prepare their 7th national reports within a short period. It is therefore understandable that many parties initially aligned their national targets with their existing implementation and reporting capacities. This context should be reflected in the interpretation of the findings. Third, Bosnia and Herzegovina considers that the section on support provided to parties should make better use of the factual information contained in recently issued document CVD SBI 7 in 17. The document demonstrates important differences in timing and availability of support, including the fact that there are eligible parties to which support for the MBSAP revision and preparation of 7th report have yet to reach. These facts represent an important piece of information in assessing overall progress in achieving Montreal targets. For this purpose, Bosnia and Herzegovina proposes the following recommendation. The subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice requests the Executive Secretary in finalizing the global report to strengthen the analysis of support provided to eligible parties by using synthesized but accurate data contained in document CVD SBI 7 in 17 on the timing and availability.
Thank you, Bosnia. Now I give the floor to Maldives, followed by Guatemala, and then Antigua and Barbuda. Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Maldives would like to state that we have submitted written statement for agenda item 3A, but on agenda item 3B, we had submitted the statement for this agenda item in the same document as in 3A. Hence, we believe our statement was not reflected in the list the Secretariat earlier displayed. And therefore, we would read a statement for agenda item 3B, and we have now uploaded the statement under the agenda item. To begin our statement, Maldives would like to express our support to the statements made by Antigua and Barbuda on behalf of Caribbean island countries and Fiji on behalf of Pacific Islands. On agenda item 3B, Maldives is generally of the view that indicators should not be updated unless existing indicators present clear challenges for reporting and monitoring. In this regard, the Maldives supports further consideration of possible updates to the headline indicators identified by the Secretariat as low readiness, with a view to their consideration at the 18th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. The Maldives also supports the convening of a group of experts to provide technical advice on this matter. Accordingly, the Maldives does not support the addition of new component or complementary indicators to the monitoring framework at this stage. Instead, we emphasize the need to strengthen national monitoring mechanisms, support by enhanced financial flow for such mechanisms, and the improved technical and human resource capacities to ensure effective reporting under the monitoring framework. We therefore propose that the Secretariat, in collaboration with partners, work on indicators, conduct targeted need-based training for parties to strengthen monitoring at the national level, particularly for developing country parties, countries with economies in transition, and small island developing states. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. Now I give the floor to Guatemala, followed by Antigua and Barbuda, and then Burundi. Guatemala, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. We'll follow your advice and keep our statement brief. I would like to refer to 3A. We have sent a few suggestions in terms of editing for the draft recommendations, and in general, we support this agenda. In this statement, I would like to highlight 4 items which are relevant for my delegation. First of all, we welcome the progress made in preparation of the global review. For Guatemala, it's of a particular importance to recognize the difficulties faced by developing countries with regards to the availability of data, financial restrictions, human resource capacity, information infrastructure, and institutional limitations for the implementation of the monitoring framework and adequately report national progress. In this regard, we support paragraph 7 of the draft recommendation, which will be considered by COP17, which urges us to strengthen technical and financial support in order to tackle gaps in terms of data and knowledge, and to develop and consolidate national monitoring systems and knowledge management systems. Guatemala also believes a priority is strengthening scientific and technical cooperation, capacity building, access technology, and support to regional and sub-regional cooperation centers. This so that countries can improve their national biodiversity information systems, data interoperability, and monitoring of indicators of the global framework. Finally, we'd like to highlight the importance of integrating traditional knowledge and community monitoring from indigenous peoples and local communities within monitoring systems, recognizing their valuable contribution to generating information for the effective and efficient management of biodiversity. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Guatemala. Thank you for save the time also. Now I give the floor to Antigua and Barbuda, followed by Burundi and then China.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This intervention is made in relation to agenda item 3A, the global review. We align our intervention with that made on behalf of the Caribbean region, Fiji on behalf of the Pacific SIDS, Maldives, and Argentina. We must register our profound concern that the specific circumstances of the Caribbean region are not adequately captured in the report's analysis. The observation that a smaller percentage of small island developing state parties submitted national reports in time to be included in the global report, and thus their experiences are underrepresented in the analysis, is not a neutral one. For the Caribbean, where less than 30% of parties have submitted reports, this underrepresentation has direct consequences on our islands. Presented without contextualization, these figures risk conveying a misleading impression that SIDS parties lack the political will or commitment to fulfill their obligations under this convention, which is emphatically not the case. What these numbers fail to capture is the absence of timely support in the preparation and submission of these documents. They do not reflect unacknowledged correspondence or protracted procurement procedures, nor do they convey the profound frustration experienced by our national focal points. Moreover, these statistics obscure the disproportionate capacity constraints facing SIDS, including limited technical expertise and the compounding effects of external economic and climate-related shocks that divert finite administrative resources away from reporting obligations. The reporting burden, while shared by all parties, falls with particular weight on nations with the smallest bureaucracies and the most pressing immediate survival challenges. To hold SIDS to the same timelines and benchmarks as larger, better resourced parties without ensuring that there's commensurate support is neither equitable nor consistent with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Antigua and Barbuda urges the SABSTA to acknowledge that the underrepresentation of Caribbean SIDS in the dataset constitutes a scientific limitation of the report, which at worst affects the validity of aggregated progress assessments. We also ask that in the future, specific methodological guidance for the aggregation of data from SIDS that accounts for baseline data gaps, ecosystem-specific monitoring challenges, and the appropriate weighting of national indicators must be developed. The report must be a tool for all parties, not just those with the capacity to populate it. For Antigua and Barbuda and the Caribbean, the report's current limitations are not abstract. They directly affect our visibility of our national efforts, the accuracy of the collective assessment, and the adequacy of the means of implementation directed to our region. Antigua and Barbuda stands ready to engage constructively on these matters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. Now I give the floor to Burundi, followed by China, and then Nigeria. Burundi, vous avez la parole.
You have the floor, Burundi. Thank you so much, Chair. Burundi wishes to associate itself with the statement made by South Africa on behalf of the Africa Group. The global assessment of the implementation of the objectives within the framework of the global platform aims at gauging the progress made by the parties to the CBD towards achieving the 4 objectives of the 2050 program. For Burundi, this exercise must be based on national data, on national reports, as well as the monitoring framework adopted by the CBD. Burundi has launched a number of projects to implement the global platform, including the progressive alignment of national policies with international biodiversity objectives, strengthening the monitoring framework and development programs, the development of national mechanisms for monitoring the objectives of the CBD, which would contribute to monitoring of the objectives of the global framework. We have noted progress in a number of fields, including improving the constitutional framework for the conservation of biodiversity, as well as the expansion of efforts to restore degraded environments, the progressive integration of biodiversity into sectorial policies, as well as the strengthening of capacities at a national level in the field of monitoring and assessment of progress. Challenges, however, remain, shortcomings in terms of national data to populate the national indicators, and a limited capacity to provide monitoring and follow-up, as well as continuing pressure on our ecosystem and the lack of financing for the preservation of biodiversity, as well as the need to strengthen the national information system on biodiversity, as well as the sharing of information and data. Burundi has set up a number of, has set up the basis for strengthening our program through the progressive integration of all of the elements of biodiversity into our policies. However, achieving the 2030 objectives will hinge on the national capacity building, as well as the availability of data and the increase of financing, as well as the implementation of conservation methods, as well as the sustainable use of biodiversity. For monitoring of the workforce, we are faced with a great many challenges. There is a lack of interinstitutional coordination and a lack of specialized human resources, as well as lack of financing, and the poor incorporation of all of this in our national policies. For all of this reason, we require technical and financial support, technology transfer to continue the implementation of the global framework. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Burundi.
Thank you so much, Burundi. Thank you for having stuck to the time that was allotted to you. I'm now giving the floor to China, followed by Nigeria, and then Malawi. Just to remind you that please do speak at a pace and rate that will enable the interpreters to follow what you are saying. Having said all this, I'll give the floor to China.
Thank you, Chair. China thanks the Secretariat and #, for their extensive and professional work on the global report. On the focus of the global review, China believes its core objective must be driven action and cooperation. It should be constructive, fully respecting national pathways based on circumstances, priorities, and capabilities. Despite financial, technical, and capacity constraints, many developing countries are advancing their NPCEPs formulation and development. These efforts deserve full recognition. Insufficient collective progress does not equal a lack of commitment or ambition. On the scientific basis of the global review, we note now that how data gaps affect assessment conclusions. Without sufficient data, we should not rush to conclude that progress is inadequate. Gaps in data accessibility indicators or reporting are not implementation gaps. On the information sources, China stresses that national reports reflect genuine implementation under national circumstances and should be the most reliable basis for global review. Other sources, such as reports from international organizations and non-state actors, should be used with caution, especially when national contexts, methods, or data systems differ from global estimates. On means of implementation, the review should better reflect the gap between current progress and ongoing needs in financial support and capacity building. Currently, the means of implementation is not growing at the scale and speed needed to achieve the goals of the framework, especially for developing country states. On the monitoring framework, we support further technical work to help parties implement it. We note that some parties expressed concerns on the need and cost effectiveness of an edge tag on indicators. If established, its focus should be addressing data gaps, not adding new indicators. Thank you again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, China. Thank you. To save time, I encourage the follow speaker to do like China. Thank you, China. Now I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Malawi, and then Nepal. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Nigeria aligns with the statement delivered by South Africa on behalf of Africa. Chair, Nigeria welcomes the global report on collective progress and commends the Secretariat for producing a robust scientific assessment of where we stand in implementing Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We also congratulate the 129 parties that submitted their 7th national report, demonstrating strong commitment to the implementation of the framework. The findings of the report are clear. While political commitment has increased, implementation is not advancing at pace required to achieve the 2030 target. This underscores the urgent need for COP17 to focus on accelerating implementation by addressing the persistent gaps in finance, capacity building, technology transfer, and technical and scientific cooperation, particularly for developing countries. Nigeria, therefore, strongly supports the recognition that inadequate means of implementation remain a primary barrier to achieve the framework. Chair, Nigeria wishes to state that our revised National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan fully aligns with the Montreal Global Biodiversity. Important milestones now position us to transition from planning to implementation, with particular emphasis on ecosystem restoration, protected and conserved areas, biodiversity mainstreaming, sustainable finance, and strengthened monitoring systems. Nigeria further welcomes the proposed establishment of ad hoc technical expert group on the further operationalization of the monitoring framework. We believe the group should remain technically focused, time-bound, and regionally balanced, while ensuring the meaningful participation of indigenous people and local communities, women and youth. Its work should prioritize closing methodological gaps, improving the operationalization of headlines indicators, and reducing the reporting burden on parties through practical and user-friendly guidance. Nigeria also emphasizes the critical importance of investing in national biodiversity monitoring systems, strengthening biodiversity information infrastructure, field monitoring, data management, geospatial technologies, and institutional capacity will not only improve reporting, but more importantly, support evidence-based decision-making and adaptive management at the national level. Finally, Chair, Nigeria supports the draft recommendation before us and encourages parties to adopt a decision that strengthens implementation support for developing countries. Achieving the ambitions of this KMGBF will require collective action, sustained political commitment, and significantly enhanced international cooperation. Nigeria remains committed to working with all parties to ensure that COP17 delivers practical outcomes that move us from ambition to measurable implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. Also, thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Malawi, followed by Nepal, and then Costa Rica. Malawi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi will be speaking on agenda item 3A. In this regard, Malawi welcomes the draft recommendation and supports the scientific and technological process aimed at strengthening implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We support the establishment of the ad hoc technical expert group under paragraph 10 as the most appropriate mechanism to continue improving the operationalization of the monitoring framework, strengthen national reporting, and support a more robust second global review. On paragraph 7, Malawi welcomes the explicit recognition of the specific needs and circumstances of least developed countries by ensuring that technical, financial support responds to national priorities and capacity constraints. Malawi further proposes that paragraph 9 be strengthened by requesting the Executive Secretary, in collaboration with the relevant parties, to prioritize the development of operational methodologies and for indicators that remain incomplete rather than simply noting existing methodological gaps. Finally, Malawi believes the findings of the global review should more clearly recognize that limited progress across several targets reflects inadequate means of implementation. We therefore propose adding the following paragraph after paragraph 3. I quote, also notes with deep concern that the limited progress towards several targets of the framework underscores that the availability of means of implementation, particularly under target 19, has not increased at a pace with implementation needs, highlighting the need for a significant scaling up of support. End of quote. Malawi believes that this addition more accurately reflects the evidence presented in the global report and recognizes the central role of target 19 in enabling implementation across the framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. I see that in the room I have many friends. Thank you, Malawi. Now I give the floor to Nepal, followed by Costa Rica, and then Uganda. Nepal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As parties have been implementing KMGBF and NBSAP, Nepal welcomes the work under the Global Review of Collective Progress and the Monitoring Framework. Nepal has submitted the 7th National Report and considers the monitoring framework as an essential element for the effective implementation of the KMGBF. However, challenges related to data availability, technical capacity, and resource constraints also need to be considered. We therefore emphasize the need for enhanced technical and financial support, particularly for countries with limited resources and complex mountain ecosystems. We urge not to make substantial changes to the monitoring framework at this stage to avoid adding reporting burden to the developing countries. The available time and resources could be better invested in KMGBF implementation. We would also like to highlight the need for regional and transboundary cooperation regarding KMGBF implementation, particularly for areas of high biodiversity, including mountains that cross national borders. Nepal remains committed to working together to advance the effective implementation of the KMGBF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nepal. I think that you are the best. Okay, let's move to Costa Rica, followed by Uganda, and then Somalia. Costa Rica, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We recognize the importance of having a robust monitoring system based on the best scientific evidence available, which enables us to assess in an objective manner the progress made towards the goals and targets of the global framework. In addition, we share the concerns expressed in the report on collective progress, because at the global level, we are still not on the right trajectory in order to achieve the goals for 2030. Costa Rica believes it's essential to recognize existing gaps in terms of data, technical capacity, monitoring, and financing, which many countries face, in particular, developing countries. The experience during the preparation of national reports shows that important challenges persist in fully implementing the monitoring framework and generating information which is consistent for all indicators. To continue with additional indicators, first of all, we need to complete the first cycle of implementation for the monitoring framework and assess the lessons learned with indicators. Therefore, Costa Rica believes that any future updating of the monitoring framework needs to be carried out in a gradual manner and based on practical experience obtained during implementation of the current indicators. In this regard, we reiterate the importance of not generating additional commitments and additional indicators. We support strengthening of national systems for monitoring and knowledge management, but highlight that this consolidation needs to be accompanied by financial resources which are adequate, predictable, and timely, and technical cooperation, technology transfer, and capacity building. Without these elements, it will be difficult for many parties to effectively comply with the requirements for monitoring and reporting. Finally, Costa Rica supports the creation of technical spaces which will enable us to continue improving the monitoring framework without prejudging the principles of regional representation, transparency, and scientific rigor. Methodology work underway needs to incorporate robust work and facilitate the effective implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and not unnecessarily increase the reporting burdens for countries. Thank you very much, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you, Costa Rica.
Gracias.
Thank you for allowing us to save some time. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Uganda, followed by Somalia, and then Jordan. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Uganda aligns itself with the statement that was made by South Africa on behalf of Africa region. Chair, the global review shows that there has been collective increase in efforts to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity, which, Chair, is critical for putting biodiversity on a path of recovery as contained in the mission statement of KMGBF. Chair, a number of challenges and gaps have been identified in the global review, and this includes means of implementation, financial constraints, human capacity, capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, technological transfer, data, monitoring, knowledge systems, information infrastructure, and human limitations, as well as institutional limitations, among others. Chair, the current draft recommendations are limited in addressing the challenges and the gaps that were identified, only covering technical and financial challenges, and leaves out most of the challenges as identified. So Chair, Uganda would like to see the draft recommendations expanded to capture all the challenges and gaps identified in the global review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. Thank you to save time. Now I give the floor to Somalia, followed by Jordan, and then Syria. Somalia, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jay, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on behalf of Federal Republic of Somalia, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the CBD Secretariat for the excellent organization of this meeting. We also extend our gratitude to the government and people of Kenya for their warm hospitality. Dear Somalia aligns itself with the statement delivered by the South Africa on behalf of the African Group. Regarding agenda item 3A and B, Somalia welcomes the global review of collective progress under the Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It provides an important opportunity to assess our collective achievements, identify implementation gaps, and strengthen action towards achieving 2030 global biodiversity targets. Despite national challenges, Somalia remains committed to implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework. We have submitted our national report, including 7 national reports, as well as the 50 national report. Also, Somalia updated National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan in aligned with global framework. And Somalia launched the Biodiversity Finance Initiative, BioFin, to strengthen biodiversity finance. DOJ, to accelerate the implementation, developing countries require predictable and adequate financial resources, enhanced capacity building, technology transfer, and strengthen international cooperation. Finally, Somalia remains committed to working with all parties and other partners to achieve the goals and targets to the GBF. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. Thank you for saving time. Now I move to Jordan, followed by Syria, and then Malaysia. Jordan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to tackle 3A. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan would like to thank the Secretariat of the Convention and the Scientific and Technical Advisory Team for preparing the document and the Global Review Report in implementation of the global framework. We agree that the world is not on the right track to achieve the targets of the global framework because it does not reflect the conclusion of the global report, because this is related to the lack of implementation means and not up to the national ambition. Therefore, we should consider balance in the wording of the decision. Concerning the ad hoc group, we are for the setting up of this team, especially when it comes to implementing the indicators on the national level. We welcome the decision concerning improving coherence among planning, monitoring, and reporting processes under the Rio Convention and other environmental agreements. However, this should not be limited to a mere study. It should have practical proposals aimed at reducing the reporting burden before the preparation of the 8th national reports. For concerning the national targets, the decision should be voluntary, commensurate with the national circumstances, avoiding the member states any increased burden. As for the implementation it is important that we emphasize the results of the global review should also be used to guide financing priorities, capacity buildings, efforts, technology transfer, and scientific and technical cooperation with a view to meeting the needs identified by parties in their national reports and not merely to identify implementation gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. Also, we save time. Thank you very much. I encourage all of you to save time, please. Now I move to Syria, followed by Malaysia, and then Cameroon. Syria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the opportunity to take the floor. We welcome the report in accordance with item 3. We also thank the Secretariat and the states parties in preparing their national reports and preparing for this meeting. This is aimed at enhancing collective progress in line with the current challenges, regionally and internationally. We also welcome the recommendations, particularly in paragraph 5 of the document CBD revision 1. And because we believe in the importance of monitoring and evaluation indicators in the framework of the implementation of Common Montreal Framework, it is important to strengthen technology transfer and capacity building mechanisms, particularly for developing countries, to enable them to use advanced technical tools responsibly and environmentally safely. And it is important also to stress the need to provide adequate and concessional financial flows through international financing mechanisms to enable the member countries to implement the framework. Syria is committed to the targets of the coming of biodiversity global framework. However, our country has suffered from environmental challenges because of the war. We need more progress with a view to helping us to modernize our ESAPs so that we can live up to the targets of this ambitious framework in line with the other state parties. But despite the special circumstances and the tremendous challenges, as well as the impact of climate change, we cooperate with our partners so that we can save the basin in arid and semi-arid regions by providing sustainable food security, ensuring sustainable food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Syria, for time saving. Now I give the floor to Malaysia, followed by Cameroon. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Malaysia's statement is for agenda item 3A. In reference to document CBD Substar-28 to at 1 Rev 1, Malaysia welcomes the inclusion of our case study on progress in operationalizing the Target 13 on access and benefit sharing. To further strengthen the global synthesis, Malaysia recommends expanding the selection of national case studies to include a broader diversity of effective implementation stories, thereby supporting peer-to-peer learning and practical knowledge transfers among parties. Despite the extensive compilation of data gathered through this global review process, we note with concern the overarching findings, highlighting a significant lack of national reporting across several key headline indicators. Therefore, the work towards the future global review must also take into account the finding of this first global review, particularly on the challenges in utilizing and reporting global headline indicators, especially among developing countries. Malaysia supports the decision on establishing an ad hoc technical expert group on further operationalization of the monitoring framework towards the preparation of the next global review. However, referring to the term of reference as per annex of the document, Malaysia calls for a proportional geographical balance and robust representation of experts from developing countries within the ARTEC to ensure scientifically feasible reporting requirements that takes into account the operational constraints, challenges, and resource limitations of developing parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia, for time saving. Now I'm going to the last speaker. I give the floor to Cameroon. Cameroon, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Cameroon would like to speak on item 3A. We would like to support the statement made by South Africa on behalf of the African Group. Cameroon welcomes the efforts made by the Secretariat and the team who drafted the Global Review and the advisory group for their contributions to this report. We'd like to contribute to the improvement of the document, Subsidiary 8, Part 3, relating to the draft review. Cameroon is delighted to be part of the study for the Cartagena Protocol. However, we'd like to make a few general comments for the global review, given the implementation of the framework. It's mentioned in the annex, which talks of the summary, document SBSTTA-28/2/add3, that the available evidence indicates that there are gaps in the collective progress and there are challenges and barriers which are impeding progress. It's also said that the report has identified 6 key messages, and achieving or taking into account will enable us to overcome these obstacles. This section of reports and the full methodology is available in the supplementary document 28/9, but it's not specifying how this section will be developed. The methodology does not specify how this aspect was developed. It's not clear how or on what basis the gaps, challenges, or barriers were compiled to arrive at the messages. In addition, it's noted that section C, G, and K are not taken into account, despite the fact that the annex of recommendation, Subsidiary 27.1, describes the main sections that must be included. Section G enabled us to conclude the drafting process, but notes that the report remains vague in analysis of section C and section K, which is practically inexistent. The key messages as formulated are sometimes formulated in a global manner and dilute the issues. For example, the key message on the means of implementation, taking into account resource mobilization and capacity building, while these are considerable issues which should be addressed separately, we therefore suggest that the formulation of key messages be reviewed according to the decisions which accompany the implementation of the global framework. When decision 15 talk about tangible indicators and credible data. Decision 16 to speak of encouraging MBSAPs solutions and better development of the reports and better use of financial resources from all sources. Decision 15.8 for effectiveness of regional cooperation centers and the capacity of countries to better implement the global framework. Key messages need to be reviewed given the gaps in terms of targets. Cameroon can only approve the global report as requested in the draft recommendation.
Merci donc.
Thank you, Cameroon.
The list of parties requesting the floor is now exhausted, so we will move to observer on our list. IPLCs, you have the floor, followed by women and then youth. IPLC, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a statement on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. On the global review of collective progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, IIFB underlines the importance of ensuring that all processes on planning, monitoring, reporting, and review are aligned with Section C considerations of the KMGBF. Section C considerations guide higher ambitions across whole of government and whole of society, bolstering effective ways and means of implementation by mobilizing the collective energies of grassroots communities, civil society organizations, and social movements working to secure the health and well-being of all life on Earth. 60 case studies submitted by indigenous peoples and local communities for publication in the 3rd edition of Local Biodiversity Outlooks affirm that we are central actors in implementing KMGBF targets on the ground. Our contributions have not been adequately reflected in the present global review, highlighting that many barriers undermining our meaningful participation need to be seriously addressed. In this regard, IFB notes that indigenous peoples and local communities as distinct actors alongside governments and other relevant bodies need to be added because we have now been omitted in several as relevant actors in paragraph 6, 8, and 14D of the recommendations contained in Substa 28 stroke 2 stroke Rev 1. In addition, IFB proposes improvements in paragraph 14A, requesting the Executive Secretary to further develop the online reporting tool to be more accessible for actors other than national governments, including welcoming independent submissions and reports, and by making the information available for the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, national targets, and national reports. Thank you, Chair, and everyone for your attention.
Thank you, IPLCs. Now I give the floor to women, followed by youth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the CBD Women's Caucus. We thank the support of parties expressed to our statement duly submitted through the early mechanism. We just want to use this opportunity to explain our rationale for the textual recommendations we have made. We welcome the findings of the global report and stress that achieving the 2030 mission of the GBF requires strengthening a whole of society, human rights-based and gender-responsive approach that recognizes, supports, measures, and integrates the contributions of indigenous peoples, local communities, people of African descent, women, youth, and other rights holders as essential partners in implementation. This must be accompanied by increased investment in means of implementation, as many of you have mentioned, strengthen the technical cooperation and more robust monitoring systems that incorporate qualitative dimensions and community-based information, data disaggregation, and strengthen indicators to improve accountability and enable more effective, equitable, and transformative action. We just also want to clarify that we are not asking for support for this statement, as we already provided our textual recommendations through the mechanism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, woman. Before we move to youth, maybe let's back to IPLC. I would like to ask party who want to support IPLC to press press button. Then I will do the same for the women.
They were already supported.
I see support from Brazil, Cuba, Peru, Panama, Namibia, Nepal, Guatemala, Fiji, DRC. Thank you. Now let's move to youth. Youth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is delivered on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which serves as the international coordination platform for youth participation to the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have submitted specific text proposal for this agenda item online and appreciate parties' support for these proposals. We are taking the floor to briefly outline our general key message as youth for this agenda item. We express our appreciation for the efforts that have been put into the preparation of the global report on collective progress. We support the latest draft of reports, its overarching message and key messages, analysis of self-reported progress by parties as duty bearers and primary holders of international obligations under the convention. We emphasize that broader global review process must also draw from the rich sources of evidence available, complementary to the global report in defining the way forward. This will enrich the evidence base given the challenges and limitations in reflecting data disaggregation perspective from traditional knowledge and community-based monitoring, as well as information owned and by non-state actors, in particular of the indigenous people, local communities, women, and youth. A global review of collective process is incomplete without being informed by the depth of information from the collective. Brief. On the monitoring framework, we support the establishment of the ATEC on the monitoring framework and affirm our willingness to contribute to its work. Thank you, Chair.
Merci au groupe de jeunes.
I thank the youth. Usually, we were no longer needing to ask country support because we'd already done so. We'd already submitted statements, and the same statements which you're now reading out. So there's no need to ask for support from countries once again, because that support has already been given. So thank you for your understanding.
Thank you, delegates, for your useful comment and suggestion. We have had a very rich discussion. On many issues, we note major areas of convergence. However, we have a range of views that require further discussion. I propose to establish a contact group on item 3A and 3B to be co-chaired by Ms. Sané from Netherlands, member of Substa Bureau for WIOG, and Ms. Paulina Stoas Salinas of Chile, member of the Substa Bureau for GURAC. The chairs of this contact may decide to establish, if needed, a friend of the chair to discuss specific issues related to sub-item B, the monitoring framework. The mandate of the contact group is to consider the entirety of the draft recommendation. As this contact group will be meeting this evening, no document will be prepared for the session. Instead, the group should have an initial discussion to decide on the way forward for its work and report back to the plenary at our next meeting. As this is the first contact group to be established, allow me to present the principles that will apply to all meetings of contact groups. First, contact group session will last up to 3 hours. They can meet from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. and from 7:30 to 10:30 p.m. No contact group will be held in parallel to a plenary session. No more than 2 contact groups will be held in parallel. Contact groups are open to participation by all parties. Other governments and observers will also be able to participate unless otherwise decided by the chair or co-chairs. The usual practice and rules will apply to participation of observers. They may speak at the discretion of the chair of co-chairs. Any substantive proposal from an observer must be supported by at least one party. I wish to remind delegates to ensure they have uploaded the full text of their intervention no later than 1 hour after close of this session. Dear colleagues, I note the considerable number of oral interventions delivered under this agenda item. I recognize that this may have reflected the circulation of the revised draft of document yesterday afternoon. Looking ahead to the remaining agenda items, I kindly encourage delegates to support the efficient management of our work. In the interest of time, delegates who have submitted advance statements are encouraged to refrain from taking the floor unless they wish to introduce substantive new point or clarification. Now, let's move to the next item, item 8, marine and coastal biodiversity. Please, let's start with the item 8. Colleague, please take seats. Please take seats. Now I start with the item 8 on marine and coastal biodiversity. I now invite the Secretariat to the floor to introduce the document. Secretariat, you have the floor. Please take seat, please.
Thank you, Chair. On item 8, the Secretariat has prepared document CBD/Substa/28/7 in response to the requests in decision 16/16 and 16/17. The draft recommendation is split into two parts, with the first part addressing ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, or EBSAs, and the second part addressing the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. With regards to the draft recommendation on EBSAs, the Secretariat has also prepared document CBD/Substa/28/7/add1, which is a summary report of submissions for the description of EBSAs and the modification of existing EBSA descriptions. This report contains the abstracts and information on the location and ranking against the EBSA criteria for each of the submissions to be considered by the subsidiary body. The full submissions are contained in information document 2/Rev1. The subsidiary body has before it two additional documents related to this agenda item. Posted as a reference document is CBD/MCB/WS/2025/1/2, which is the report of the expert workshop on scientific and technical work conducted under the Convention on Biological Diversity relevant to marine biodiversity and areas beyond national jurisdiction. And document number 5 under Other, which is the background document for the draft voluntary guidelines on peer review processes for the description of areas meeting the criteria for EBSAs and other relevant, compatible, and complementary scientific criteria. The subsidiary body is invited to consider the draft recommendation provided in Substa document 28/7. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. As previously explained, information document 10 lists the 26 submissions received from parties and the 10 statements from observer on item 8 by the deadline. The list of parties and observers indicated in the information document is also being displayed on the screen. Note that this list only includes observers that have registered on site. Given that the modalities for early submission of statement were intending to be a time-saving measure, the parties and observers are that submitting early statements may wish to refrain from delivering an oral statement, except where necessary to make clarifications. Parties and observers that did not submit written statement during the informal process may wish to request the floor and submit their written statement as per established procedures. Colleagues, are there any objection from any parties observer listed in the information document to your statement being formally entered on on record as statement officially submit for the agenda for this agenda item in this meeting, please raise your hands if you have any objection. No objection. Thank you, colleagues. Your statement will be formally entered on record and considered as officially submitted under this agenda item. Regarding the statement submitted by observers, I will go through the list on the screen, one by one. Representatives of observer organizations are requested to press their microphone button so that we can confirm that you are in the room. I will then ask parties to press their microphone button if they support the statement made by that observer. I will read out the party's name from the speakers list. Yes, Secretariat, you can help me proceed, please. Thank you, colleagues. On the screen, I can recognize BirdLife International. Are you present in the room? Yes, thank you. Parties to support. I can recognize Egypt, Nigeria, Cuba, Spain, Netherlands, DRC, Finland, France, Marshall Islands, Iceland, Fiji, Congo, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Chile, thank you. Now I move to the next division for Ocean Affairs and the Law of the Sea. Okay, you are here. Thank you. Parties to support. Yeah, Secretariat, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's Egypt, Australia, Ghana, Nigeria, Italy, Netherlands, European Union, Canada, Chile, Fiji, Sweden, United Kingdom, France, Iceland, Haiti, Morocco, Congo, Dominican Republic. And that's the end of the list, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. The next is ECO Mexi. Okay, thank you. You are here. Parties to support. Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Morocco, France, Netherlands, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Colombia, Marshall Islands, and that's the end of the list.
Thank you. The next, Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Are you here? Okay, thank you. Parties, Secretariat.
Fiji, Egypt, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Netherlands, Panama, Congo, Dominican Republic, Marshall Islands.
Thank you, Secretariat. The next International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. Okay, you are present. Thank you. Parties, Secretariat.
Fiji, Brazil, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Canada, Cuba, Chile, Guatemala, Marshall Islands, China, Congo, Ghana, and Dominican Republic.
Thank you. The next, Office of the United Nations High Commission. Okay. Thank you. Parties to support. Secretariat.
Egypt and Morocco.
Thank you. The next site is Secretariat. Are you here? No. You can move to the next. The next United Nations Development Program. Are you here? Okay. Thank you. Parties to support. Secretariat.
Egypt, Brazil, Cuba, Sweden, Burundi, Suriname, Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, Haiti, Congo, Panama, Netherlands, Morocco, Italy, Democratic Republic of the Congo, European Union, Dominican Republic, Fiji, Ghana, and Malawi.
Thank you, Secretariat. Now the last one is WWF International. Are you here? Okay, thank you. Parties to support. Secretariat.
China, Egypt, Canada, Brazil, Cote d'Ivoire, Cuba, Netherlands, Congo, Tanzania, United Kingdom, Spain, Chile, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Morocco, Fiji, Gabon, France, Haiti, and Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Secretariat. Now we are finished with the observers. I will now open the floor for intervention on item 8. Begin a regional group. Please request the floor now only if you are speaking on behalf of the regional group. I remind you that there are 5 regional groups: African states, Asia Pacific states, Eastern Europe states, Latin American and Caribbean states, Western European and other states. I will be limited in intervention to 4 minutes for parties speaking on behalf of region, 2 minutes for this item, 2 minutes for individual parties, 3 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholder groups, and 1 minute for non-parties to the convention and other observers. Time permitting, microphone will turn off automatically when the speaking limit has been reached. I may close the list of speakers as needed, but will give fair warning before I do so. Please read out your key points, especially those that you would like to have reflected in the draft recommendation, and be sure to upload your written comment no later than 1 hour after the close of this session. Juste un rappel.
Just a reminder. I see on the screen states who have already requested the floor. I just want to confirm that these countries who have requested the floor are speaking on behalf of the Africa group, the Asia Pacific group, and all of the groups that I just listed previously. If this isn't the case, if anyone wishes to speak in their own national capacity, I would ask you not to take the floor for now. So please do toggle your request off, and let's hear those who will speak on behalf of the groups that I've just referred to. Thank you so much for your understanding.
Okay, if it is the case, I will start with South Africa, followed by Fiji. Okay, I give the floor to Fiji after, but not now. I start with South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa has the honor to speak on behalf of the Africa region. The Africa region welcomes the document SBSTTA-28, reflecting progress made in implementing COP16 decisions 16 and 17. We commend the Secretariat, the informal advisory group on EPSAS, all the parties for advancing this important work. We welcome the submission of new and modified EPSAS by the parties, in particular the African parties. We also look forward to the consideration of this submission in this meeting or at this meeting. The submissions demonstrate Africa's growing scientific capacity and commitment in terms of implementing the KPMG. The Africa Group supports the continued implementation of EPSA process, which is a scientific and technical process to inform area-based management, but also broadly as a useful information. We welcome efforts to broaden the participation in terms of the EPSA process, recognizing that meaningful engagement of relevant stakeholders does not just enhance the scientific robustness of the process, but it enhances inclusivity and the credibility of this process. The Africa region reaffirms that the EPSA process is a technical exercise. It does not prejudice the rights, our jurisdiction, our legal position of states under the international law. Chair, the Africa region notes the findings of the Global Assessment Report, in particular reference with the marine and coastal biodiversity, which shows persistent gaps in terms of biodiversity data and the monitoring, particularly for developing countries. addressing these gaps is important to make sure we make informed decisions, but also for the implementation of the GBF. We therefore call for the development of scientific technical guidance materials on responsible application of emerging technologies, including your environmental DNA, remote sensing, and other innovative monitoring tools to strengthen biodiversity assessment, data accessibility, scientific collaboration, and in particular for developing countries. Africa Group welcomes the entry into force of the BBNJ agreement and recognizes the opportunities for future collaboration, and such should promote complementarity and respect for the respective mandates. We also want to indicate that subject to the convening of the COP.
Thank you, South Africa. Thank you. If there are no more parties speaking on behalf of a regional group, I will open the floor for parties, followed by observers. I will take the first intervention from Fiji, followed by Bahrain, and then Egypt. Fiji, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Fiji speaks on behalf of the 14 Pacific large ocean states and the custodians of the Blue Pacific continent, as this item is central to who we are. The Blue Pacific is home to some of the world's richest marine biodiversity. Collectively, Pacific Seeds steward approximately 28 million square kilometers of ocean, nearly 1/5 of the Earth's surface and the planet's blue lung. Through our commitment to effectively conserve 30% of this ocean by 2030, we are safeguarding almost 9 million square kilometers of globally significant marine ecosystems, one of the largest natural capital endowments on the planet. This is not simply a Pacific asset. It is a global public good, underpinning climate regulation, biodiversity conservation, and planetary stability. Yet, this contribution remains underappreciated and under-resourced. If we are serious about addressing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, then investing in the stewardship of the Blue Pacific must become a global priority. Chair, we warmly welcome the breakthrough achieved on the modalities for describing new ecologically or biologically significant marine areas and for modifying existing descriptions. Chair, we must also talk about what is at stake. As we speak, the rapid increase of carbon absorption in our ocean is driving the largest and most intense super El Nino of our generation that is impacting our very planet. Chair, the Pacific continues to demonstrate global leadership by managing one of the world's largest blue natural capital endowments. Chair, therefore, we ask parties.
Please bring the microphone to Fiji because they speak on behalf of Pacific Island.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we request for consideration of three things. First, that the new and modified EBSA descriptions prior to this meeting be advanced through the agreed peer review process to COP17 so that the science keeps moving. Second, that marine 30 by 30 be measured by effective conservation and its principles. Around 1/10 of the ocean now carries a protector label, but only a small fraction is genuinely and effectively protected. Third, that island biodiversity receives the dedicated attention it deserves, as islands represent only a small fraction of the Earth's land area, yet they harbor a disproportionately large share of the world's endemic and threatened species. Their uniqueness warrants a distinct focus under this convention. The best available science is absolutely clear. Coral reefs are projected to decline by 70 to 90% at 1.5 degrees of warming and by more than 99% at 2 degrees. The fourth global coral bleaching event has already affected the overwhelming majority of the world's reefs and 4 Pacific peoples whose food security, economies, cultures, and identities are inseparable from healthy oceans. And this is not a future scenario, it is our lived reality. Chair, the Pacific continues to demonstrate global leadership by managing one of the world's largest blue natural capital endowments. The ecosystem services generated by the Blue Pacific benefit every nation, yet the costs of protecting them continue to fall disproportionately on Pacific seeds. Greater recognition of this contribution should underpin the efforts to scale up access to climate and biodiversity finance for our region. Chair, we ask parties to match the science with ambition, to match our stewardship with meaningful investment, and to protect the ocean because all our future depends on it. And I thank you.
Thank you, Fiji. Juste, je voudrais
I just want to remind you that regarding the item that we have tackled, item 3, the idea was to give 4 minutes to the parties, and we had agreed that for the following items, we would revert to what we had decided earlier in the initial scenario notes. So we're now going to return to 2 minutes per party, 2 minutes. So I ask for your cooperation, and this way we will save some money. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by giving the floor to Bahrain, followed by Egypt, and then Ghana. Bahrain, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Chair. Now, the Kingdom of Bahrain would like to pay tribute and extend its gratitude to the Secretariat for having prepared all of these documents. Sir, as an island state, biodiversity is of great importance to us, both for the seas, the coast, and all the other parts of our kingdom, for it provides us with our cultural identity and our food security. And for this reason, we would like to touch on the following points. We welcome the progress achieved by EPSA, and we back the adoption of the principles underpinning the peer review as a very important step forward in terms of transparency and the scientific cohesiveness of these regions. Secondly, we welcome the principles falling outside the areas of national jurisdiction to ensure that this agreement remains a sustainable and stable one. Finally, we would like to stress the importance of expanding training activities, especially projects aimed at strengthening our oceans in a sustainable way and achieving all of the objectives, which are to protect 30% of the high seas, which of course will rely on financial support and capacity building. For all of these reasons, the Kingdom of Bahrain would like to underscore its readiness to cooperate constructively to ensure that we're able to protect our seas and oceans. Thank you.
Merci à
Thank you so much to Bahrain. I would encourage all the parties to continue in this spirit of cooperation. And I again urge the parties who have submitted their early statements, if they don't have anything else to say, they can limit themselves just to the important parts, the important elements, anything that they feel that might have been omitted from the early statements. So I encourage the parties to continue to cooperate to make progress, and I hope that we will continue in the same spirit to ensure that we're able to finish on time. I'm going to start by giving the floor to Egypt now. Egypt will be followed by Ghana, and then Chile. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Egypt support a statement already given on behalf of African region and acknowledge the new descriptions of IPSA from Africa. Mr. Chair, IPSA process should continue to be guided by the best available scientific information, transparency, and scientific credibility, strengthening national scientific capacities and encouraging broader participation of parties, particularly developing countries, will contribute to a more representative and significantly robust global repository of IPSA. In this regard, Egypt supports further recognition of nationally generated scientific information and marine monitoring programs as important source of evidence for IPSA submission. Also, we welcome the draft voluntary peer review guidelines. It should remain voluntary, flexible, and non-prescriptive, and they strengthen scientific quality and of submission without creating additional procedural requirements beyond the agreed by the conference of the party. Egypt supports all cooperation between CBD and the new agreement, UN agreement on the conservation of marine resources. However, we think that cooperation should be discussed later after the first COP, which is expected to be.
Thank you, Egypt. Dear colleagues, I will soon close the list of speakers. Let's move to Ghana, followed by Chile, and then Malaysia.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, we align ourselves with South Africa on behalf of Africa, and we welcome the draft voluntary guidelines on peer review processes, which recognize the importance of traditional knowledge and the need to respect free, prior, informed consent in the use of such knowledge. The use of traditional knowledge should be matched by clear, verifiable procedures for documenting and confirming same, where such knowledge is used, referenced, or synthesized. Regarding biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, Ghana encourages continued efforts to ensure that cooperation and implementation processes appropriately recognize and benefit from the knowledge and participation of right holders consistent with the references already made in the draft decision. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ghana. Now I give the floor to Chile, followed by Malaysia, and then Argentina. Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to its early submission, Chile expresses its warm support for the amendment suggested by many delegations to Para 7 to welcome with appreciation the entry into force of the BBNJ agreement. And we invite all countries in a position to do so to ratify the agreement and join its first COP in January 2027. In the same spirit, on Para 8, Chile strongly supports taking note of the outcomes of the expert workshop on areas beyond national jurisdiction, generously supported by Germany, Ireland, Norway, and Sweden. In Chile's view, the prompt and effective implementation of the BBNJ agreement requires further enhancing cooperation, collaboration, and synergies, as appropriate, across relevant instruments, frameworks, and bodies, including the CBD. In line with our long-standing commitment to the law of the sea, and as the second country in the world and first in the Americas to ratify the BBNJ agreement, Chile is pleased to reaffirm its offer to host the BBNJ Secretariat in the port city of Valparaiso. In the same vein, we strongly support the establishment of an informal advisory group on work conducted under the Convention in relation to marine biodiversity of AB and Jane, while remaining flexible to engage with other delegations for the further refinement of its mandate. Our country also supports the proposals made by Germany, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and others for an OP3bis regarding support for the identification and recognition of essential and particularly sensitive habitats of aquatic species. Chile adds its voice to the proposal by the United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, and others for an OP12bis mandating the Executive Secretary to synthesize scientific and technical information on marine biological and ecological connectivity. Chile supports the proposal by several delegations for an OP13bis requesting the Executive Secretary to further enhance coordination with other multilateral environmental.
Thank you. Now dear colleagues, the list of speakers is now closed. Before I give the floor to Malaysia, let me remind the name of the next speakers. Secretariat, please, can you help me about?
Thank you, Chair. The names of the speakers, the speakers that are remaining on the list are Malaysia, Argentina, India, Indonesia, China, Seychelles, Sudan, Guatemala, Saudi Arabia, Russian Federation, Kenya, Peru, Zimbabwe, Somalia, Tanzania, and youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Now I give the floor to Malaysia, followed by Argentina, and then India. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Malaysia welcomes the document CBD Substat/28/7 on marine and coastal biodiversity and its recommendations. Regarding the draft recommendations, Malaysia wishes to highlight three technical proposals. Malaysia proposed to...
Please speak closer the mic or shift on, please.
Regarding the draft recommendations, Malaysia wishes to highlight three technical proposals. Malaysia proposes deleting the reference to COP Decision 1526 as the mandate to finalize the EPSA modalities requested under Decision 15/26 was completed and formally adopted under Decision 16/16 referencing the Decision 1526 is now redundant. The second one is refining the language in Annex 1. While Malaysia supports the adoption of Annex 1, we propose amending the terminology from voluntary guidelines on peer review processes to voluntary considerations. However, given the non-binding and voluntary nature of the annex, Malaysia remains flexible on this phrasing. The final matter is that Malaysia would like to bring to the attention of the Secretariat and colleagues is the annex on the estimated extra budgetary resource requirements. Malaysia would like to seek clarification on the intention of the annex, as the document only states that it is not part.
Thank you, Malaysia. Now I give the floor to Argentina, followed by India, and then Indonesia. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Argentina thanks Secretariat for preparing the documents, recognizes the importance of continuing to strengthen procedures related to marine areas of biological importance, because this contributes to science, transparency, and trust between parties. In this regard, Argentina reiterates the importance of preserving the central role of states throughout this process. The request for creation or modifying EPSAs needs to come through states in line with their priorities and national circumstances. They need to prepare them with other stakeholders. In this regard, we believe it's necessary to provide greater clarity on the functioning of the peer review process. In particular, It's essential that we specify the stages of this process, criteria for selection of experts and participants, conflicts of interest, dealing with confidential information, and modalities for participation of stakeholders. Greater predictability will continue to strengthen legitimacy, transparency, trust in the process. On the creation of expert groups, Argentina believes that the guidelines should set out sufficient information on professional institutional experience of those taking part in these, and adequate representation of the various disciplines and sectors linked to the management and sustainable use of marine biodiversity to guarantee adequate geographical representation as well. Finally, on references to fisheries, Argentina recalls that currently there's no single mechanism available for sustainable use of marine resources. In the same lines, we'd like to highlight that the fish definition of this should not just be related to biodiversity, but other conditions such as policies and the other conditions required. Thank you.
Gracias, Argentina.
Thank you, Argentina.
I give the floor to India, followed by Indonesia, and then China. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India thanks the Secretariat for the documents prepared under this agenda item and welcomes the co-chair summary of the Bergen Expert Workshop as a valuable contribution to strengthening the scientific and technical cooperation under the Convention. India emphasizes that any follow-up should proceed through the established process of the Convention while respecting the mandate of competent international organizations and relevant international legal instruments, including UNCLOS. On EBSS, India supports extending the mandate of informal advisory group and welcomes the voluntary peer review guidelines. The IPSA process should remain science-based, rely on best available scientific knowledge, and allow the refinement of IPSA descriptions in light of new evidences. Peer review should remain voluntary, respect confidentiality of unpublished scientific information and traditional knowledge, including free, prior, and informed consent, as appropriate, and be consistent with the Decision 16/16 and national registration. India reiterates that IPSA repositories is an information resource that neither confer legal status nor prejudice that sovereignty rights, jurisdictions, or maritime delimitations of the state under UNCLOS. Any use of IPSA information under the other international instruments, including BBNJ agreement, should remain consistent with their respective mandates. India supports implementation of BBNJ agreement in a manner consistent with UNCLOS, ensure fair and equitable benefit sharing from marine genetic resources, strengthening capacity building and marine technology transfer for developing countries, and respecting the rights, jurisdiction, and duties of the state without underestimating undermining the existing international law instruments or competent international organizations. Finally, India supports the balanced composition of informal advisor group, ensuring scientific expertise together with equitable.
Thank you, India. Now I give the floor to Indonesia, followed by China, and then Seychelles. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia welcomes the continued discussion on strengthening scientific and technical cooperation for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity, including in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Indonesia sees merit in strengthening synergies among existing frameworks. These efforts should enhance complementarity, avoid duplication, and support coherent ocean governance. We also consider that socio-economic considerations should be appropriately reflected alongside ecological and scientific considerations. Biodiversity conservation and sustainable use should contribute to human well-being, while scientific integrity remains the primary basis for technical guidance. Indonesia further emphasizes the importance of strengthening coordination among competent organizations at the national, regional, and international levels. We also support the continued use of the clearinghouse mechanism as a voluntary platform for sharing scientific information, methodologies, best practices, and implementation experience, particularly to improve knowledge and data availability in data-poor marine areas. Finally, Indonesia supports the development of voluntary guidance for biodiversity-inclusive environmental assessments that takes into account cumulative pressures, including climate change, pollution, and coastal land use change, while remaining responsive to national circumstances and capacities. We will submit our full intervention online. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to China, followed by Seychelles, and then Sudan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On item 8, we note that the draft decision from Secretariat proposes updating the technical documents on marine protected area, EISA, and establishing an informal advisory group on BBNJ. This would add complexity to existing mechanisms. We suggest leveraging the current information advisory group on EPSTA and hosting online BBNJ workshops to engage more experts. Producing thematic reports when appropriate will build synergies, avoid duplication, and also save financial resources. I thank you again, Chair.
Thank you, China. Thank you for time saving. Now I give the floor to Seychelles, followed by Sudan, and then Guatemala. Seychelles, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Seychelles supports a statement made by South Africa on behalf of the African Group. Seychelles supports the extension of the mandate of the Informal Advisory Group for EPSAs to provide scientific and technical advice to support the EPSA process. We also welcome the coming into force of the BBNJ agreement and recognize the importance of the agreement towards the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction and to support the achievement of the KMGBF. Furthermore, Seychelles supports the establishment of an informal advisory group on work conducted under the Convention in relation to marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, but emphasize that this advisory group should be inclusive in representation and participation from all regions, including small island developing states. Finally, we stress on the need for capacity building, scientific and technical cooperation, and technology transfer for effective participation in the EPSA process. Thank you.
Thank you, Seychelles. Thank you for time saving. Now, I give the floor to Sudan, followed by Guatemala, and then Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the reports submitted under this item. Conserving marine resources and coastal areas is faced with tremendous challenges. This requires international cooperation and technical and scientific support. We would like to stress the following points. Scientific description of EPSA is, for us, is important. It is important to identify the description of ecologically and biologically important areas on a solid scientific basis. It is important to provide support for the member countries to well conserve and manage these areas, to build capacities and transfer and ensure technology transfer with a view to enabling coastal and developing countries to have access to modern technology, advanced monitoring mechanisms, as well as building national and local capacities to better manage protected marine areas. 3, sustainable and ecologically sound management, particularly concerning coastal and marine activities. It is also important to reduce the effect of unsustainable activities. It's important also to protect traditional fishermen. It is also important to provide financing, sustainable and financing through mechanism with a view to supporting projects, in particular in the Red Sea area.
And now I give the floor to Guatemala, followed by Saudi Arabia, and then Russia Federation. Guatemala, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Marine coastal ecosystems are essential for the conservation of biodiversity, the maintenance of ecosystemic services, and the well-being of coastal communities and resilience faced with climate change. Our country has a national agenda of priorities for the expansion of protected marine coastal spaces, recently approved, and 2 sites of ecologically recognized importance, and another underway. We have temporary and permanent fisheries, and we have National Maritime Administration, which is the interinstitutional organism tasked with coordinating maritime activities of the state, including its protection. In this regard, Guatemala welcomes the proposal for the implementation of new modalities for the description and updating of areas of importance, which increase its scientific credibility, incorporating new knowledge and facilitate more comprehensive representation of marine biodiversity at global level. We also support the promotion of cooperation for the conservation and sustainable use of marine coastal biodiversity and the promotion of synergies between BBNJ and other relevant agreements. We support the adoption of the recommendation proposed, and we urge you to continue strengthening capacity building, technical cooperation, and the exchange of knowledge on this topic in particular. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Guatemala. Thank you for time saving. Now I give the floor to Saudi Arabia, followed by Russia Federation, and then Kenya. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Sayyid al-Rais.
Mr. Chair, Saudi Arabia would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this important document. We also welcome the progress achieved in marine and coastal biodiversity, and including the voluntary aspect for assigning the expert in the ecological and biological area. Half of these areas has no legal ramifications, particularly concerning the legal mandate of state parties. It's important to respect sovereignty of the states on these areas beyond jurisdiction. We welcome the voluntary guidelines, and it is important that these guidelines be flexible with no excessive burden. It is important that it includes elements to protect sensitive national data, particularly data on maritime genetic resources in accordance with relevant national laws. Under the global framework, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has gone a long way in protecting its maritime environment. We have assigned a target to increase these areas to 30%. We also have national initiatives that are underway, including in the Red Sea. As for areas beyond national jurisdiction, the Kingdom stresses that the respect for international tools and instruments is extremely important. Sorry.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Now I give the floor to Russia Federation, followed by Kenya, and then Peru.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Generally speaking, we welcome the continuation of work on the scientific characterization of EPSAs, including on the high seas. We are pleased to see that the process has begun in keeping with our decisions at the last COP. Having said this, the proposed draft guidance for conducting a peer review appears confusing in its focus. It is not entirely clear what exactly is being reviewed. It is within the framework of an internal national process or within the framework of the CBD process. The proposed process is extremely complex and it's extremely time and resource consuming. Furthermore, states already have their own processes and they should not be told how to proceed at the national level. In this case, we could look at a compendium of best practices which states could turn to if they deem it to be necessary, rather than this being binding guidelines. In the case of a review in the framework of the CBD process on EPSA, there should be a completely different process, one which would fit within the established 6-month period for receiving comments. So we cannot accept the document as it is presented, but we are prepared to work on possible revisions to the text to produce an acceptable and useful version, possibly as a set of reference elements. Now, regarding the expansion of the CBD's scope of work to areas beyond national jurisdiction, we do not consider this to be appropriate and useful. In January, a specialized agreement will come into effect, and it will address these very issues. Now, it is also not clear what this group is going to do, what the results will be, what the use will be, and this is why we believe that there's a need to delete paragraph 13. We also see no justification for the role of the Secretariat, as mentioned in paragraph 12. However,
thank you, Russia Federation. Now I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Peru, and then Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya aligns with and supports the statement delivered by the African Group. Kenya supports continued scientific and technical work on marine and coastal biodiversity, including the critical process for describing and modifying EBSAs. Kenya commends the progress made by the informal advisory group on EBSAs and supports the extension of its mandate as agreeable by the parties. To enhance transboundary management, Kenya proposes strengthening collaboration across marine and coastal ecosystems to directly address the shared challenges of overfishing, pollution, and climate change impacts. Kenya proposes the following additional text to the decision: encourages parties and other governments to contribute towards increasing the global coverage of the complementary tools available to identify important marine areas, including key biodiversity areas, important marine mammal areas, important shark and ray areas, and important marine turtle areas, in order to inform the description and modification of ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, notably in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and to realign with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. To effectively deliver on these objectives, Kenya recommends increased technical and financial support for developing countries to implement national marine spatial planning processes and establish locally managed marine areas. Finally, Kenya called for enhanced synergies and cooperation with other multilateral environmental agreements, particularly the BBNJ agreement, CITES, CMS, the Ramsar Convention, and the UNFCCC, driven by concrete joint programs and aligned work plans. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya, for time saving. Now I give the floor to Peru, followed by Zimbabwe, and then Somalia. Peru, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Peru, thanks, Secretariat, for drafting the voluntary guidelines on processes for peer review for the description of areas which meet the criteria to be considered areas of ecological and biological marine diversity, and other scientific criteria compatible, complementary, which are relevant. Peru welcomes the strategic review and commitment of the Secretariat in developing the various processes and interactions at international level related to marine ecosystems. Their proactive work not only contributes to cross-cutting nature of marine biodiversity globally, but also has been essential in order to make more robust multilateral synergies, which are essential between international processes. This encourages the interlinkages of marine biodiversity and coastal biodiversity as a cross-cutting approach in order to achieve the targets set out. Peru recommends on compatibility with other international processes that the guidelines should promote methodological consistency with the BBNJ agreement. In short, we'd like to incorporate additional observations related to the use of best scientifically available information of quality, which is traceable, can be reproducible, and which reduces data uncertainty. Consistency of data with BBNJ and other MEAs and better cross-cutting nature of geospatial information differentiation, which is clearer between peer review and other processes. Chair, thank you very much. And we will send in writing our contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. Now I give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Somalia. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe supports the statement made by South Africa on behalf of the Africa Group. Zimbabwe is not a coastal state, Chair, and we do not have marine life, but two of our big rivers are, of course, connected to the Indian Ocean, and some of our freshwater use depend on healthy oceans. We also value the significant role of healthy oceans in addressing the triple planetary crisis, including the climate change. And this is why Zimbabwe joined other nations under the agreement on the law of the sea, and also protection of biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. We therefore support the draft recommendations on marine and coastal biodiversity, and also the voluntary guidelines and peer review processes for the description of the areas meeting such criteria for ecologically and biologically significant marine areas. Finally, Chair, we thank the CBD Secretariat for the work that they have done on this item, and we also wish to express our support for the statement which was shared by the CITES Secretariat in using the early submission criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for time saving. Now I give the floor to Somalia. Somalia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jay, for giving me the floor. Somalia support statement made by South Africa on behalf of the African region. Somalia welcomes the progress made on marine and coastal biodiversity, particularly the work on biological significant marine area. The Sustainable Ocean Initiative on strengthening cooperation on marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. As a country with one of the African longest coastline, Somalia recognizes the importance of conserving marine ecosystem for biodiversity, for security, and sustainable livelihood. We are pleased to note that Somalia has ratified the BBNJ agreement, and we will soon deposit our instrument of ratification, demonstrating our commitment to global ocean governance and conservation. We call for increased financial support, capacity building, technology transfer, data sharing, scientific cooperation among countries to effectively implement the common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and other related agreements. I thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. The colleagues, I have remaining on the list of speakers the following: youth, IPLCs. Youth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The statement is delivered on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We have submitted specific text proposals for the Marine and Coastal Biodiversity Agenda item online, and thank parties for their support. We are taking the floor briefly to outline our general key priorities as youth for this agenda item. On EBSAs, we highlight that traditional knowledge must be recognized as a co-equal part of the evidence base for EBSA descriptions, not supplementary to science, but alongside it. And its use must always be subject to free, prior, and informed consent. We also believe that compiling experiences on how the information in the EBSA repository is being used by parties and other actors would be helpful to understand the importance of this work. On marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, we welcome the Bergen's Ocean of Opportunities report and the entry into force of the BBNJ agreement. We underscore that the CBD's decades of experience in rights holder and stakeholder engagement is an asset that should actively inform BBNJ implementation. We support the proposal to establish an informal advisory group on marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction and highlight the importance of a diverse and inclusive composition to include indigenous peoples and local communities, women, and youth. We also encourage further collaboration through the CBD Substa and the BBNJ scientific and technical body. Finally, we encourage parties and other governments to ensure meaningful and inclusive participation at the national level on issues related to marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, but also on marine and coastal biodiversity more broadly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Youth. I give the floor to IPLCs. IPLCs, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity welcomes the entry into force of the BBNJ agreement. In addition, we welcome the mandate of the ad hoc expert group on marine biodiversity. At the same time, we urge parties to ensure that indigenous peoples and local communities are fully recognized, not just as stakeholders, but as holders of rights, holders of knowledge, and experts whose participation is essential in these processes. In particular, we call for the decision and its annexes consistently recognize indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge as knowledge systems which are distinct, along with the best available scientific knowledge in line with the KMGBF. This principle needs to be reflected throughout the entire decision, including in the guidelines for peer review, expert workshops, and future scientific and technical guidelines. In addition, we welcome the inclusion of free, prior, and informed consent for the use of indigenous and traditional knowledge. This safeguard needs to strengthen knowledge, in particular because indigenous peoples act as experts representing their people and communities, ensuring we can fully respect the quality of their knowledge and that they can take part under Section C of the KMGBF. Finally, as cooperation between CBD and the BBNJ moves forward, the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities needs to be guaranteed in this new coordination mechanism. Effective governance of marine biodiversity, including areas beyond national jurisdiction, depends on the knowledge, management, and expertise of indigenous peoples. Chair, the International Forum of Indigenous Peoples on Biodiversity has provided specific textual modification proposals for the decision and its annexes. These are in the document uploaded to the official platform of CBD, and we respectfully ask for the parties to take these into account throughout their deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, IPLCs. Thank you, colleagues. We have completed the first reading of agenda item 8. Distinguished delegates, I have taken note of the extensive discussion on this matter. Accordingly, I will establish a contact group to be co-chaired by Ms. Oli Kele of the United Kingdom and Ms. Patsy Contado of Chile. I will proceed to prepare a non-paper with the assistance of the Secretariat. In line with established practice, the non-paper are not intending to be a compilation of all proposals. Instead, they will contain my proposal for consensus text aimed at facilitate a more efficient negotiation. Details regarding the timing and organization of the group's work will be communicated in due course. The usual rules for contact groups apply. Now let's move to the next item, synthetic biology. Colleagues, please take seats. Please take seats. Dear colleagues, we will now take up item 5, synthetic biology. I now invite the Secretariat to introduce the documents for item 5, synthetic biology. Secretariat, you have the floor. Please take the seat, please. Please. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. For consideration of this item, the Secretariat has prepared document CBD/SABSTA/28/4 containing a summary of the outcomes of the intersessional work conducted in relation to synthetic biology, including the outcomes of the ad hoc technical expert group on synthetic biology. The Secretariat has also prepared document CBD/SABSTA/28/4 Ad 1, which contains the draft thematic action plan. Kindly note that this draft thematic action plan is also expected to be considered by the subsidiary body on implementation at its 7th meeting. In this regard, the draft recommendation prepared for the consideration of SABSTA does not include implementation-related aspects. The subsidiary body is invited to consider the draft recommendation contained in document 28/4 and the draft thematic action plan contained in document 28/4/Ad 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Colleagues, as we have already the scenario notes contained in document CBD/SABSTA/28/1/Ad 2 refers to modalities for the early submission of statement for SABSTA 28 in Annex 2. The statements submitted early under this agenda item in accordance with the modalities are being published online as they were received at cbd.ent/meetings/SABSTA 28 under the statement tab. In addition, information document 10, early submission of statement, lists the 22 submissions received from parties and the 5 statements from observers on item 5 by the deadline. The list of parties and observers indicated in the information document is also being displayed on the screen. As the early submission of statement was carried out on an informal and voluntary basis, parties and observers listed in the information document are free to revise their statement or deliver oral statement in accordance with the established meeting procedure. However, given that these modalities were intended to be a time-saving measure, the listed parties and observers may wish to refrain from delivering an oral statement, except where necessary to make clarification. Parties and observers that did not submit written statement during the informal process may wish to request the floor and submit the written statement as per established procedures. Are there any objection from any parties or observer listed in the information document to your statement being formally entered on record as statement officially submitted for this agenda item in this meeting, please raise your hand if you have any objection. I see none. Thank you, colleagues. Your statement will be formally entered on record and considered as officially submitted under this agenda item. Regarding the statement submitted by observers, I will go through the list, which is presented on the screen one by one. Note that this list only includes observers that have registered on site. As I read